day to you students. I, Brenda de Cruz, welcome you to an English lesson in poetry for class 10. The poem is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. We have either heard or read stories or poems on enslavement and freedom, and may have mused on a few that touched our heart. Maya Angelou is one of the many who dared to voice her belief and opinion, and saw to it that she was heard loud and clear. Before I begin, I request our student listeners to follow the poem in their textbook. Keep a notebook or a rough page with a pencil to take down important facts or details. This will help you while you are planning your assignments or writing personal notes. So let's begin with an introduction to the poet. Maya Angelou was christened as Marguerite Annie Johnson. Her brother Bailey gave her the name Maya. At the age of 3, Maya was sent to Arkansas to live with her grandmother due to the separation of her parents. At that time, Arkansas was a racist society, due to which Maya experienced discrimination not only for being an African American, but also for being a woman. At the age of 7, she met with a tragic incident which led her speechless for 5 years. The magnitude of her trauma was such that it made her imagine that her voice could kill. Her teacher, Bertha Flowers, contributed greatly in her recovery, and Maya began writing poetry. Thus, poetry played a significant part in the retrieval of her voice. In these 2 paras, you will get to understand the poet's life, her childhood, the events that led her to be a poet, the reason she wrote this heart-rending poem. Maya Angelou was an illustrious poet, novelist, memoirist, dramatist, actress, and civil rights activist. She dynamically worked in the civil rights movement and with Martin Luther King Jr., whom she sought inspiration from. She wrote Georgia as a dramatist in 1972 and became the first African American woman to have her screenplay produced. Her autobiographies are All God's Children Need Traveling Shoes and A Song Flung Up to Heaven. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Angelou tries to contrast the flight of a bird that is free with the caged bird whose wings are clipped. By projecting 2 contrasting images of a free bird and a trapped bird, the poem metaphorically alludes to the differences between the whites and the African Americans during the civil rights era. The poem is an ode to freedom. The poet has revealed the importance and value of freedom. She is aware of the tortures of being tormented for being a black, and therefore she knows why the caged bird sings. Let's begin with the first stanza of the poem. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. In the first stanza, the poet refers to the flight of a free bird that springs free from the ground, rising, diving through, gliding, and then swooping down in the midst of the air current until it ends. The free bird seems to be basking in the orange rays of the sun, a representation of power and positive energy. It celebrates its freedom by inhaling the peaceful and joyful atmosphere. The free bird has no uncertainties, no worries, and so it flies as though it owns the sky. We experience the beauty of freedom in the first stanza. It gives you the feeling of being just you. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. You will notice the second stanza is distinct to the first. It begins with the word but, which instills a doubt, a caution. It is making you think of something diverse or a contrasting act is to arise. It expounds the dark frustrations of a caged bird. It speaks of the unfathomable agony, hurt, misery, and emotions one goes through in enslavement. The caged bird is restricted of movement and free thought and has limited vision within the bars of a narrow cage, and so this culminates into anger and rage. It is enslaved. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied. With all these challenges and complexities, the caged bird has only one option, that is, to make its presence felt and voice heard. He opens his throat to sing. Here we feel and sense the miseries of bondage. It gives us the feeling of discomfort and distress. The caged bird sings with fearful thrill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. In the third stanza, the caged bird sings with a shuddering uneasiness and distress of things unseen, still desiring for the indefinite freedom, if and when it comes. The caged bird's song for freedom is heard far and wide, probably to the distant hills where the white people reside. The caged bird represents the poet Maya and all African Americans who faced discrimination, prejudice, slavery during the apartheid. They did not fail in making their presence felt by voicing their opinion to seek justice. the third stanza culminates into a heightened urge and longing for freedom. You actually want to reach out and set the caged bird free. The free bird thinks of another breeze and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on the dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. In the fourth stanza, the poet takes us back to the unrestricted and limitless freedom of the free bird, for it desires more liberty and longs for the soft winds of another land and the fat worms that are waiting to be eaten on the lawn at sunrise. While the caged bird is to be fed, the free bird has a choice to choose the finest feed for itself. The free bird thus has the courage to claim the sky, as though there are none other to compete with. Here, we revert back to the basket of goodies freedom offers. Although this stanza lightens our thoughts and emotions, our heart is still on the caged bird. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The fifth stanza reveals the vulnerability of the caged bird, for it dreams of freedom, but is also aware it is an impossible dream that will never materialize, and therefore, afraid of its own shadow, screeches and shrieks for freedom. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The sound that escapes his throat is that of a scream. Once again, we are made to witness the desperation and the hopelessness of the caged bird. The feelings of empathy is arisen in us. The caged bird sings with a fearful thrill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The sixth or the last stanza is a repetition of the third. It lays stress on the caged bird's song for freedom and once again reveals the distressing condition of the caged bird. Its yearning to be set free. It is an overwhelming cry to make the listeners realize the agony, the rage, the agitation that is accumulating upon the crushed dreams of the caged bird. In desperation, the caged bird pursues for its freedom. So, by the end of the poem, we may say that the poet has enlightened and enriched us on the inevitability of freedom, as every living being hungers for it. For restrictions, confinements, and limitations may be tolerated for a short while, but once the need for freedom is realized, everything else fades. Let's move on to appreciate the writing styles used by the poet to enhance the poem's rhythmic elegance. The first, structure. The poem consists of 6 stanzas. Each stanza begins with a capital letter with no punctuation marks. The poem is written in free verse. Next, tone and diction refers to the poet's attitude towards the subject and the choice of words. The tone of the poem is calm, direct, and powerful, while the words used are concrete, simple, and straightforward. The phrases "orange sun rays" and "dares to claim the sky" speak of freedom, the light-heartedness and exuberance of the white race. Whereas phrases "narrow cage," "bars of rage," and "fearful thrills" depict the African American narrow social space, their anguish, and their vulnerability. Third, rhyme scheme. No definite rhyme, but a few lines rhyme internally. For example, breeze, trees, lawn, own. Thrill, still, herd, hill, bird, dream, scream. Alliteration. It is a repetition of consonant sounds, usually the beginning of a word. Examples are can seldom see through. So we have seldom and see. The free bird thinks of another breeze. Bird and breeze. The fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn. Worms waiting. So the W. His shadow shouts on a nightmare screen. So we have shadow and shout. The S. Repetition. To put emphasis on a particular idea. The 6th stanza is a repetition of the 3rd stanza, which stressed on the cage bird's song for freedom. Personification is an inanimate ideas are given to attribute life. So here we have a free bird leaps on the back of the wind. It takes the support of the wind to soar high. The trade winds soft through the sighing trees. The trade winds cause the trees to create a soft hissing sound. His shadow shouts on a nightmare screen. The bird is afraid of its own shadow, so the shadow shouts aloud for freedom. The shadow has been given life. His shadow is screaming for freedom. Metaphor is a figure of speech. A comparison between two different things is implied. Here, the cage bird is a metaphor for the poet Maya Angelou and all those African Americans who faced discrimination, prejudice, and enslavement during the apartheid. The next we have is imagery. Images that create graphic pictures in the mind using the 5 senses of smell, touch, sight, hearing, and taste. The poet has used visual imagery. The free bird flying in the orange sky. You can visualize the bird flying and enjoying the orange sky. The caged bird standing on the grave of dreams. You can picture the bird standing on her own unfulfilled dreams. Auditory imagery refers to the birds singing. His fearful thrill, his tune is heard. The trees sighing, shadows shout on a nightmare screen. Kinesthetic imagery is stimulated by body movement and tensions. The words used by the poet are float, leap, dip, clipped, and sing. Themes. The core themes in the poem are as follows. Freedom versus enslavement. Freedom and enslavement governs throughout the poem. We experience freedom in stanza 1 and 4, and enslavement in stanzas 2, 3, 5 and 6. Freedom is symbolized through the unrestricted movements of the free bird, whereas enslavement is symbolized by the caged bird whose wings are clipped and feet are tied. Racism and suppression. The poem communicates the poet's emotions against discrimination and slavery in America. The free bird represents the white race and their dominating influence, whereas the caged bird is a metaphor for African Americans and their confinement or social imprisonment. The poet expresses her anguish and grief through the restricted flight of the caged bird. The next one is voice against subjugation. A reference to clipped wings, tied feet, and restricted movement depict the physical pain the caged bird had to endure. The struggle on the caged bird is parallel to the African American struggle for freedom and equality. The African Americans wrote, sang, danced, and cried out for freedom. Though they were heard as a distinct voice, they did not give up. They did not fail in raising their voice against discrimination. To conclude, the poet Maya Angelou, through her poem, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, has voiced her belief and opinion strongly against prejudice, oppression, and discrimination, not only faced by her, but also by all her brethren, the African American people. Some important information, probably it would help you in your future readings and understanding. In order to enhance your learning and understanding on racial discrimination and oppression faced by the African Americans, you must read and watch the following classics. To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. To Sir with Love by E.R. Brathwaite. 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northup. Becoming by Michelle Obama. Some movie adaptations are as follows. To Kill a Mockingbird, 1962. To Sir with Love, 1967. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, 1979. The Rosa Parks Story, 2002. Invictus, 2009. Hidden Figures, 2017. In fact, you must use and organize your time well. I think this is the finest opportunity you have received to explore learning. So watch movies and extend your readings not only to entertain but to educate yourself. And I'm sure you will enjoy learning. So happy learning. Students, Please read the poem at leisure as many times possible to appreciate and comprehend for better understanding. So it's time for me to take leave, your leave. Thank you for listening. Thank you.